Yes.
Firstly, thank you all for attending this webinar, this interview entitled Views from Across the Pond, a bit of an interview with Mr. Knox here. For those of you that don't know Scott, Scott was Managing Director of the MAA, which was the trade body association for agencies such as ours, and it was essentially an earlier incarnation of the alliance. And 5 years ago, he was headhunted from to run the equivalent of what is the IPA in Canada, the Institute of Communications Agencies. I've got that right, Scott, is that right? The ICA?
No plural on the communication, Institute of Communication Agencies.
Okay, right, got that. And has moved his whole family over to Toronto. And since then, he's been aggressively pushing the agenda for both independent and networked agencies in Canada and North America and the wider global field, which we'll understand a little bit more from through an organisation called Voxcom. Scott's going to give us UK's agencies basically an insight into the challenges that North America's been facing, particularly over the pandemic, the response, and what UK agencies may learn from that experience, who are now working, as he's now working in Canada. And I think he's ideally placed to compare and contrast all the stuff that's going on. So Scott and I have had a couple of sessions on this. So we've got a fairly structured talk around how we're going to handle it. It should last around 45 minutes, depending on how much I let Scott talk around various subjects. Basically, it will cover a whole host of different subjects, from the pandemic to basically what's happening globally. We're going to talk about effectiveness, we're going to talk about talent, we're going to talk about D&I, and we're going to talk about remuneration, as well as something close to the Alliance's heart in terms of the independents versus networks and how they've responded. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Scott and for you to give me a quick 5-minute background on what you've been up to in the last 5 years.
God.
Now, you were always very, very shy and a shy character in the industry back when you were in the UK. So assume you've been carrying on this tradition, yes, Scott? No? Yes.
Yeah, I haven't shut up since the day I landed. And that's been an interesting old bit of a journey, because the Canadians don't quite know how to take me, because they're far politer than us Brits. So what have I been doing? So yeah, actually quite a lot of different things. It took me a while to get my head around that I wasn't just running what was this group. It was the wider community of the agency sector in Canada, the equivalent of the IPA, if you will. I had very little experience in media agencies, so I had to get my head around of that really quickly, which is still a bit of a challenge for me, I'm honest. I moved house twice. Got together with some of the other associations around the world and launched a global version of us all in Voxcom, which again wasn't easy. For those of you who've been involved with this organisation for its long history will know that I often rubbed aggressively the wrong way the IPA when I was running the MAA, so trying to work with them now has been rather entertaining. But yeah,
did they remember you, Scott?
Oh yeah, Paul Bainsford does. Yeah, I mean, bless him. He absolutely remembers me. But I had a breakfast with him before I left, and one of the things he said of this organisation and what we've done is he said you need to be really, really proud of what you've done as a community, because the IPA has things that make a lot of money and has a much bigger structure, and there are sort of mandatories. If you leave the IPA, then you paying for your data on television and broadcast becomes very, very ultra expensive. And so they have some silver bullet services. And his point of view about the MAA and now you guys was that, we do it as a community, but we do it with attitude, and we are much more future focused, and we should be really proud as a community of that, because in many ways he viewed what we'd achieved was quite different. Didn't quite get saying better.
Have you taken that sort of that rebel type characteristic trait over to
I did, but it actually tripped me up. I had a bit of a sort of an 18-month into being in Canada wobble. I mean, the thing about Canadians is I love being here as people. Watching the kids and their experience at schools here is just phenomenal in comparison to the rather right-wing skullduggery and veiled bigotry that we experience with the kids' school in Putney in southwest London. And
right.
you know, so it's for all that I love. However, the industry and the business, the passive aggressive of Canadians is off the Richter scale, basically. And actually it's very difficult to work with, because if you're somebody who's very vocal and very out there and very pushing the agenda, with passive aggressive in play, what happens is you don't find out people think it was a pile of shit until about 3 weeks after by 3 other people. It's not direct. And that was a bit of a curveball for me. And I remember actually picking the phone up to Ian Milner and going, oh my God, how do you cope with dealing with different markets? Because it really took the wind out of my sails. And his point of view was actually, you need to remember you're running the IPA, not the equivalent of the MAA, and you need to sort of change. And actually I came off that and thought, you're wrong, actually. So I put my foot to the floor and up my sort of rebel center. And actually over time, the market really came to swing around. You know, at the end of the day, the ICA came after me, and I made it really, really clear about my attitude and how I work things. And I said, if you just want another Adland Lovey, go and hire one. Don't hire me. And so, but it was really a bit disheartening. I remember the CEO of one of the networks here asked me for lunch. And he said, Scott, you need to be really careful, because, you know, you're making us, you know, feel that we should have been a bit afraid of what we wished for. And now you brought it with such gusto. We're not sure if it was the right decision. And I went, tough shit, too late. And, you know, I just got a bit more, I think this is the thing with diversity, equity and inclusion, everything in this mix. I think the more unique you are, the more you centered on yourself, the more you trust yourself, actually you'll be better for it. And don't allow those negative voices either outside or inside your head to sort of throw you off curve. Stick to what your guns are, because at the end of the day, if they really didn't want it, they'd have fired me, and fine, whatever, you know.
And I guess 5 years into it, you've survived the shock.
I have, I have. And what was really, really staggering was that actually because of the pandemic, and actually me and the team really, really full on advocating for the agency centre and acting as a gravity of centre as a community, which I saw that you guys did as well. You know, that then gave people a sense of purpose and a sense of, you know, the heart was at the middle of this. So actually our membership increased dramatically during the pandemic and post it, unlike some of our other sister associations around the world, which is quite worrying. But, you know, our membership, and I think because people trusted that I would advocate and I wouldn't stop, that they knew that I had their back. And so actually over that period, the pandemic sort of threw up the associations into a new spotlight. And you know, we work with that. I work with that.
That's interesting, that, because that sort of brings us on nicely to one of the first topics around the pandemic, in the fact that the trade body became essentially the information source for a lot of agencies. Yeah,
it was. So yeah, I got myself involved with lots of different organizations, some that actually became a little bit of a sort of emotional struggle. I started attending about 3 or 4 weeks before Canada went into lockdown. So March, I'm talking about February, beginning of February 2019. I got invited, and I can't remember how it happened. I think it was through the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, asked to attend these weekly sessions by the World Health Organization, but it was by Dr. David Nabarro, who's always on television, I know, in the UK. And he's the special envoy for WHO for North America and Europe. So I was attending these weekly sessions and getting an update on what was coming. So I was. With the Dr. David? Weekly. And actually, we had a couple of sessions on our own trying to talk about how could we maximize comms around getting galvanized, you know, attitude and community around what we needed to do for the pandemic. So I was thrown a little bit of a curveball. What that meant was I turned that information and then played it back to member agencies, firstly to agency C-suite, to be able to say, look, this is what you need to know is coming down the track. Everybody was astounded when we did our first Zoom session. I think it was on the Monday, so it's a 30, 40, 16th of March. And I said to everybody, by Easter, in Canada, no, globally, we will have 1 million cases. And everybody's jaw dropped. Now, as it was, we were 1.5 million by the time we hit Meester. Yeah. And now we're, approaching 200 million cases globally. It was huge. And people couldn't believe this. But the other group that I started imparting information to was planners. Because what we think was really interesting about the pandemic from an agency perspective is that procurement, all the red tape between clients and agencies was shoved out the way, because brands needed agencies to work really hyper fast and get to insights and get to information and change the narrative in real time as consumers were going through the challenges they were facing, or perceived they were facing, actually, more importantly. And what I was able to do is to take all this information about what WHO was saying ahead of us, particularly picking up what was happening in Asia, then coming through to Europe, and then going to hit North America. I was able to say to them, look, this is what you need to know. This is what people are going to face. And so comms needs to start to feel like this. And so it became really odd. At times I felt like I was doing news at 10. Doing this is what we're happening in cases, this is what's happening in Australia. And I have to give a shout out, the country that I've most admired in this entire situation, nobody focuses on New Zealand, was actually Vietnam. Vietnam, with a population of 100 million, right on the borders of China, right on the borders of Wuhan province, up until a few weeks ago, had less than 30,000 cases. And below 1,000 deaths, because and it wasn't because of vaccines, it was because of the track and trace and isolate. They absolutely nailed it. So I was able to impart some of that, but also then to inform through the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to other parts of the Canadian economy what was going on. So it was really bizarre. All of a sudden I was thrown into this world and of information that I was never really party to. But became really, really fundamental to agency owners to go, right, this is what's going to happen next. Shit, is that really going to happen next? Yes, it is. Okay, so let's face it. So I will give this group something, and we didn't plan for me to say this, Jamie. I will tell you this. I attended a session on Friday. And it was probably one of the most, so having had my second vaccination, our kids are getting their second vax tomorrow. Canada's starting to open up again. It's all looking like we're back to rosy perfection. Go on, Jamie.
Because you're sort of looking at the vaccination rates. You've done phenomenally well.
We're about 80%. It was really bad to begin with. We were way behind the United States and the UK. And actually, I have to be honest, watching people on Facebook going, "I've got my second vax," or whatever. That was really irritating for a while. But we caught up. So we're about 80% first, and we're approaching 30% second across the country. But the disheartening thing, and parts of this is where you'll see where some of the things I had to impart to our members, and I'm about to do what I'm about to tell you to them later this week. The WHO have said two things. One that you guys should know, Boris Johnson has basically, now I'm paraphrasing, Boris Johnson has basically signed the UK up to be a petri dish, a test ground. So you're rolling out of lockdowns and like let's burn our masks. You're heading in that direction quite deliberately because he has an agenda that he wants to test what happens. This is not based in scientific fact at all. So he's heading the UK, for right or wrong reasons, into unknown territory, and is the only country on the planet doing this. So this notion of throwing up the gates is their decision, the Conservative Party's decision, the government's decision, because they want to see what happens. And do you know what? It could go fine. It could go absolutely fine, but it's a bloody big risk. The second thing that's actually a global issue is WHO now are saying, so I'm just looking at my notes here, we should expect a mutation to break through vaccines. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And our only hope, and this is why the global agenda on vaccinations has to happen, is we have to get as many vaccines in people's arms as possible, because it brings down the amount of virus transferring and traveling across the planet. The higher the amount of vaccines, the higher the amount of virus traveling around the world, which is still going up and up and up. What was it? Namibia is now a positivity rate of 56%. Right. So there are scary things happening across the world, maybe not on our doorstep. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to have a variant that will break through the vaccine as it currently stands. So I'm saying that not to say, God, Scott, stop being so melodramatic. This is not Dynasty. I'm saying that because you as business leaders need to prepare the fact that you'll have to make decisions sharply, because you are in a country where you're throwing yourself right out of lockdown mentality, and you could be pulled way back in very, very quickly. And you'll have to think for your own businesses and for your clients about what that means. Okay. Because we know that globally, COVID fatigue is real. You'll be feeling it, I'm feeling it, but consumers are feeling it. So what does that mean about our activations moving forward? So I say that not to cause a stir, but to go, you need to prepare. Sure. That at some point later this year, possibly into 2022, if the WHO are right, we could be back where we were X months ago.
Okay.
And we need to prepare for that.
It's quite sobering. And it's interesting that you're getting such real feedback right from sort of the heart of the WHO in terms of that feedback. And I guess, is that being valued from your member agencies? Are you able to play that?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think that in our CEO meetings, I could see the numbers declining, if I was honest. I think I had a couple of my own board saying to me, "Oh, Scott, less of the WHO report and more about," and that's COVID fatigue. I don't believe those people were saying they didn't, it's just they wanted to see an upward. And I can understand that. From a mental health point of view, we've got to try and see there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. But the fact of the matter is that we've seen agencies, we've seen associations across the world go to the wall, right? That's the reality because of the pandemic. And clients are making business decisions, business critical decisions that will impact you. And so I'm imparting this information because I want you to be forearmed and forewarned. So therefore you can take the decision about what conversations you have with your client. Bottom line is the pandemic elevated the marketing profession, because tech giants, management consultancies, and other players in our field were sidelined entirely. They did not understand what consumers were thinking or being. That's our job. And if that's the case, you need to be as close to your client as possible. Does that mean you need to be closer to the truth or close to be prepared for the truth? I would argue yes, but that's your commercial decision and your relationships with clients.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
But not everybody wanted to hear it, Jamie, to your point. Not everybody wanted to hear it, and that was fine. Oddly, the group that wanted to hear it all the time were my production leadership group. So I've got a huge contingent of people who are in commercial production. And of course, they need to know whether the Canadian Tire or the HSBC or the bloody Macy's campaigns were going to be filmed, both digital and broadcast. And so they need to know, have I got to test everybody? Have they got to have a mask on? Can I do this commercial shoot? Can I do it in Montreal? No, I can't. I've got to move it to Toronto. They needed to know. And so for some people, it mattered. For some people, it didn't.
No, I think that's fair. I think so. And what we've seen is a time and a place, and people, as you've said, it's fatigue elements that come through, and the differing issues that
our resilience has been challenged, and we need to know that.
Yeah.
But I think we need to accept it's going to continue to be challenged for the next few years.
I think so. So just moving on to that global picture, you mentioned Voxcom, and admittedly, I hadn't heard about Voxcom until we started chatting, which is interesting. Can you have a chat? Explain to the group what that is and how it came about.
Yeah. So I basically, and I don't know, when I was in the UK running the MAA, I did get a vibe of what the Association of National Advertisers, the ANA in the US, I got a vibe what they were like, and they're really aggressive. They're actually really on my wavelength, to be honest, but from the client perspective. So they're the US equivalent of ISBA. And their leadership were always, they started all the sort of federal investigations into media agencies and all this sort of shenanigans. So they're really full on. The World Federation of Advertisers exists, and that's the global body for clients. And I just thought, where is the agency version of this, taking on these big global issues? And so I reached out to the IPA, the 4As in America, the EACA, the European equivalent, and just said, guys, and they were actually already talking about this, which was great. So they'd already had some meetings. And so we just basically decided, right, let's do something. We need somebody to have a voice for the agency sector. in opposition at times, or in conjunction with, whatever way we want to go, with the World Federation of Advertisers and the ANA in the US. So I just felt that, much as I did when I was in the UK, there are certain things that need to be said to clients to their face about what they're up to, particularly in the new business space. Remuneration, value, let's list it on. Let's all have a good bitch about procurement if we want to. All those issues that we've been talking about for many, many years. And I just felt that there needed to be a global version of this as a conversational strategy. So we've now got 39 countries involved in Voxcom. And what's been really interesting is finding out what's been happening in other countries, particularly because of the pandemic, but also because of the changing nature of client-agency relationships. And so Tamara Dortroff, who's the head of the EACA, she's president, and I'm treasurer. We've created our first board, and we've started to take on things.
That's really good to hear, because I think, we often, any market, UK, and particularly because of the pandemic, we've all become very sort of insular, looking at our own. The walls have gone up around every country. So I think from a Voxcom point of view, it's really interesting to hear, what are you seeing that are, say, common themes across markets, and then maybe differences as well?
Yeah, I think the really alarming thing is, and that I mentioned earlier about procurement being sidelined during the pandemic. That certainly happened. So the red tape that gets in the way between clients and agencies was sort of shifted because we all had to work at hyper speed. The clients were upgraded at the boardroom table because they were the need to know people. They knew everything. They were really empowered at the C-suite in corporations. Agencies went up with them, and those agencies that were really part of a client's thinking in a really fundamental way went in that direction. Yeah. What happened in 2021, though, alarmingly, is and my cynical brain tells me that this is deliberate. The number of new business reviews is skyrocketing across the globe.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't help but feel this is procurement trying to wrestle the way back to the table, because they realise they've been sidelined in many ways. I also think it's about client tactics of trying to beat down incumbents. Because there's been a lot of business that hasn't transferred, it hasn't moved, but obviously rates have gone down. And so I think we need to be purposeful as agencies and wondering what the hell we do with this, and whether we play ball. Yeah. And for many, many years, for far too many years, we were debated and discussed what we do from a new business perspective. And we need to fight this one. We need to go, do you know what, that RFP shit, we're not doing it, sorry. We're better than that. We're more valuable than that. But the other thing we need to do is we need to remember that we've just had a really good time. I don't mean that everybody's had a great time financially or otherwise, or from a mental health perspective, headcounts have dropped. I don't mean that. We have been put in a spotlight. And if ever we wanted a period in time, it's horrible that it took a pandemic to do it, to shine a spotlight on the value of agencies. It has just happened over the past 18 months. Yeah. It is therefore our job, and this is easier, I would argue, for independent agencies, to put our foot to the floor on our value and stick to our guns about how we want to be perceived and remunerated. Because if we don't, we'll be negotiating out of a hole, because we've all just dropped our rates because of economic concerns. Right, so we've got to push our way back to the table and keep it there, and remind clients of our value.
And that's what you refer. We've talked about this in terms of the agencies having more courage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've seen too many. Right, so we may get on to having a conversation about networks versus independents. We could even get into a conversation about Manchester versus London. We could even get a conversation of Vancouver versus Toronto. Do you know what? I've been doing this game of running trade bodies for 20 years now, and I'm done with that bullshit, because you're looking at the wrong issue. It does not matter where you are as an agency. The problem is our value is being attacked. And the problem with independent agencies, I've heard for far too long, we're smaller, we're more nimble, we're going to be cheaper. I've even heard here in Canada going, we should be selling the fact that because of the exchange rate between the US and the Canadian dollar, we should be selling Canadian agents off the back of that. And I've said, no fucking way. I'm selling expertise, value, because we're more effective than the US agencies, because we have a more integrated market. I'm not going to sell cheap, and neither should you. And I think, comparing one agency with another, the type, the structure is utterly irrelevant, because everybody is doing the same thing under the bonnet. And I'll show you. So this is a book by a guy called Jason Harris, right, called The Soulful Art of Persuasion. We had him do a Zoom session with our membership, and he runs an agency based in New York called Mechanism. They're terribly cool. They have hoodies with Mechanism on. It's all just like terribly frightfully New York and cool about it all, sort of, you know, Greenwich Village hype. And I think their work is fantastic. It is absolutely stellar. But during the session, I said to the guy, my God, you know, your new business strategy, how you talk to the world, how you activate, how you be, is winning your business. Oh my God, that's fantastic. But tell me, are you based on hours in model, or are you doing value-based pricing? Oh, well, yeah, we're on the same model. Right, okay. So the headlines are not congruent with what's going on underneath. And that's the problem. Everybody's looking at the wrong thing. Whether you're a holdco owned agency, an independent agency in Manchester or Birmingham or London, Toronto, Vancouver, it does not matter. The problem is we are stuck in input time-based remuneration, which is killing us. And that is what we have to change. And you as independent agencies have no reason not to change that. Otherwise, you might as all stayed in a holdco agency.
So that's sort of the Tim Williams type theory.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So to me, this whole thing comes from a guy called Ron Baker, and Ron Baker is a great consultant. We've worked with him several times, and he does consultancy work for management consultants, law firms, and the big financial and audit companies on value-based pricing and consultancy behavior and modeling and all of that type of thing. He really influences people like Tim Williams and Blair Enns and various other people who do the books and the circuit of speaking, and they're all fantastic. But one of the things that I've noticed here doing this rally cry about value, 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 when you pitch, give the client 3 goddamn prices and do not waver from that. The first one is what they've got the budget for. And so, yeah, you can get this. There you go. That's what we get. Or there's this one that's a bit higher, that actually it's a bit, if you're not ambitious, never mind. Or the one option 3, which is so sky high it frightens the living bejeebers out of that. Those are the type of things we should be doing as agencies. Price the client, not the work. That's what we have to do. And the thing is that working with people like Tim Williams and many of the others, we have worked out that for a 1% change in value-based pricing in your agency, you will change 10% profitability. Just 1%. The other hard fact of this is sometimes you might have to make the decision, and you as independent agencies are far better placed to do this than the holdcos. You may have to eject every single client. Because getting a client to change from input costs to value-based pricing, existing client, is hard, really hard. But starting a new relationship on that basis is far easier. And if you all made the decision to jettison one client for value-based pricing, it will change everything on how you'll move forward. And my colleague Leah, I brought her on about a year after I got here. She was COO of Grey, and before that DDB. Amazing woman, a totally amazing woman, love her. She goes into agencies to help train people on how to pitch value-based pricing. And the problem that we have in all types of agencies is that the agencies have got 75,000 reasons why they won't do it to a client, because they think they know the client's reason for saying no. The hurdle is client leadership. It is not the client. And so I just think we've had a really good period of eyeline spotlight on what we do and our value. The management consultancies, the tech giants who everything is pushed by button, color by numbers, basically, he says with his Boy George t-shirt on. Anyhow, cultural references go out the window, I know. But the bottom line is, if we don't get on top of this, we might as well accept that we're just going to have less and less and less and less.
Okay, so I'm getting a few questions in on the chat and stuff, which please do, if you've got any more questions, please do fire them in. We'll either sort of involve them in the conversation through the discussion guide, or if we don't, we'll catch them at the end.
Sure.
I think Stuart Dunk was saying, I think something about the ANA and the WFA.
Yeah, so I
that,
can,
yeah.
I can sort of give you a couple of comments on that. We've had some rather interesting meetings with the World Federation. The WFA want to do a whole new set of pitch guidelines and remuneration model packages. And we, because we're Voxcom, have offered to get involved with that. But I have basically, and this has been really interesting, because I basically drawn a line in the sand and saying, I'm happy to do a guide, but if it's going to be an a la carte, everything you can do is possible, count me out, because I've been doing guides till I'm blue in the face. I did God knows how many in the UK, and I've done them here. What we do want to do is set out leadership on how these things should happen, not give everybody every route possible. The job of trade associations is not to deliver to lowest common denominator of the industry. It is to the highest common denominator. And if that's the case, I basically, we built, and I put the link in, I'll send it to you. We built a toolkit called qualification-based selection, which is an entirely new way of doing an agency review. It's based on how architecture, engineering, and sort of consultancy-based firms are reviewed. And it basically makes price a non-determinant factor, which you can imagine how many procurement people go, really? And also it's a challenge for agencies, because you've got to stop giving away spec. We have got to stop this ta-da moment, the jazz hands of, oh, look at this polyboard and this PowerPoint, look what we can do. You've done it in a vacuum without the client. All of it's going to go in the bin. You're going to start again. And who's paying for that? Right. So we've got to stop this dog and pony show of the ta-da moments. So the premise of QBS is basically, show me the case studies that speak to my issue, challenge, or sector. B, show me how you are structured, your processes, and how you're built, and your people, in order to guarantee replication of success from those case studies I've seen. That's it. And then the last thing you do, when the client's selected their top 3 agencies, you do a price negotiation. So, you know, we've got to start changing all of this. And so I'm pushing this with the WFA, and it's not easy. They are quite resistant, and it's been, we'll see how that goes. But what you can say will happen is either A, we'll do a joint guide that actually works and means something, or it will be B, and this is good, I'm probably going to get slapped by my fellow associations for saying this, they'll publish without our brand on it, and then I'll be sitting and kicking and screaming, saying it's a humming pile of shit.
I hope it's not the latter.
One of the two. But things need to be done, Jamie. We need to stand up for ourselves.
That's coming through loud and clear, Scott, which is refreshing, but to hear, but equally, it's can be quite sanguine on one case in terms of for agencies, in the fact that we have to sort of strap something on every now and then.
I get that, but here's some basics that I think, I gave that if you change your pricing models by 1%, you'll add 10% to profitability. I'm not saying you've got to go and reinvent the wheel tomorrow morning. I also sort of reflect on, a lot of you are from holding company agencies and decided to leave and go off on your own and do something different because you wanted to be something different in the world, and yet you're replicating what you came from. Don't. You are the ones, your buck stops with you. You can make these changes and decide what you want to do, or if you want to be in the same bun fight as everybody else. And the third thing is, there are really pragmatic things like, if a client says to you, pandemic economics, and you decide you are going to discount, you absolutely include that on the invoicing. 10%, 15% economic, COVID-19 economic discount, because that will tee up procurement not to start from that level of negotiation. Sure. Right, so it's the basics to do.
I'm gonna change tack slightly, because we've got still quite a few subjects to go through. Talent, obviously, always related to the previous topic in terms of how we get there. Obviously, it's been through a massive roller coaster over the last 18 months. What we're seeing in the UK market is now starting to tightening up. What's the talent market like at the moment for Canada? Has COVID changed your approach to that? What are the things that you've seen through?
Yeah, it has. The thing that I can tell you about the Canadian agency sector is we're more diverse in terms of makeup of our talent than any other country in the world. And we know that because we've done the talent censuses and we've worked that out. So we're coming after your clients, people, because we're going to be saying, if you want a true diverse agency, don't wait for other countries to change, just bring your business to Canada. But you didn't really want to hear that. So I will move on. The thing that has happened from a people perspective is if you see it as a challenge, but it's an opportunity. I think one of the fundamental things that particularly independent agencies can do is set up their own stall of who they want to employ. There is going to be massive shift in where people work, right? It is just ahead of us. We can see it already here. From what I understand in the UK, it's already happening. People deciding, I'm not going to work in a network agent, I'm going to work in an independent. People deciding to get out of the industry altogether. All of this is going on.
Yeah.
However, we know that there are certain commoditizable parts of our industry that we can let go. We can charge more for consultancy and senior creative and strategic input.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have an opportunity to take from other industries and change the culture and texture of the agency sector. And that's the opportunity.
Okay.
Because we do what no other industry does from a marketing communication point of view, and that is we understand consumer behavior and we act towards it, and we drive business success off the back of that understanding through creative means.
Sure.
That's the case. Why can't we take people from the management consultancies who've had a really shitty time working from home, go after them? Why can't we take the people from Amazon, Google?
Yeah.
Take them back, take those people, bring those creatives from in-house.
Yeah.
They would probably have had a really crap time in-house, bring them back into the agency sector. So we've got a really good opportunity here to set out our stall and bring people in with a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And to charge more for it. So the talent thing is going to be a hurdle. You're going to lose people. People are going to want to leave the industry, but that's happening in every single sector.
It is not
every single sector.
Unique to just agency land.
It is not at all.
Agencies. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, the harder, it's maybe not the right word, the more corporate industries are the ones that are going to face the biggest team challenge, because people have been sat on their own at home and going, is this the sum total of our life?
Sure.
We as agencies have always been the better place to be creatively, strategically, thinking, behavior, culture. So let's hoover up those great minds from other industries. And that's why I do think, we're about to do it here. We're going to be putting out calls from the ICA to welcome people from all of the other industries in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's what should be happening, because our doors are open to those cultures, those balances, have your side hustle, do your other job, your company, your charity, you're sitting on boards. You can do that here. If you're working at Deloitte, that's really tough.
Okay.
Come and work here,
That's great advice, I think. Really sound. You mentioned D&I. You were obviously a trailblazing around the industry 5 to 10 years ago. Setting up Pride AM and etc. and all that sort of stuff. What's your view?
What you mean now? Advertising? Don't get me into that one. Anyhow, you
got 2 minutes to answer this one.
Okay, so DEI. What I'm finding a bit irritating is suddenly it's fashionable.
Okay.
That's a bit irritating, particularly for those of us who've worked on it and been part of it and trying to drive it. For many, many years. That's disheartening.
Yeah.
I am bored to hell with pledges. I mean, seriously, the number of pledges, sign up to this, promise you'll be that. No. Your asset, you'll be a better business by having diverse mindsets. And I don't just mean ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. I mean mental, neurodiversity. I mean economic diversity. You'll be better for it if you've got those people around that table thinking for your clients and thinking for who you are as a business.
Sure.
So there's a lot of pledging. And the other thing, actually, it's not an entry point thing. Actually, this is slightly nuanced in different countries. For Canada, our problem is not people coming into the industry. Our diversity in most indicators is fine. We're ahead of the national population on most areas.
Yeah.
Our problem is intermediate getting through to C-suite.
Right.
It's just not happening.
Right.
And that's because not empowering authenticity.
Yeah.
If you take on a person of difference, or if you have a person on your team who is different, diversity, if you're encouraging them to be their entire whole self, then you're only paying for about 50% of a person.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm going to jump about a little in interest of time. One of the stuff that one of the key topics that we were talking about in the prep sessions was about trailblazing. Would you be able to provide any sort of inspiration to the audience in terms of agencies that you're seeing over there that are making a mark in Canada or the US or anything?
Yeah, I think what I love about what's happening in North America, actually, and I don't know whether this is happening in Europe, but it seems to be that the idea of the fame game of being in an agency, having a senior somebody or other, or an executive creative director who is suddenly lighting up the sky, is sort of disappearing. And actually the nuance of the behavior of an agency is sort of taking front role. And I noticed that I think this is actually doing really well for Canada and not so well for the US, because the US is very fame game orientated and is very much more siloed as an agency sector. Canada's much more integrated. And we don't have the diversity of agencies, i.e. we don't have big tanker digital and big tanker DM and so on. Actually, they tend to be quite holistically in one space. What that's meaning is that the fame game should not be about an individual. It should be about a sales line. And I have noticed that some of the agencies that are doing really well and have picked up huge amounts of business. Let me give you an example. There's an agency here called Broken Heart Love Affair. Right. Jay Cheney, who used to be head of strategy for Cassette, one of the most successful Canadian agencies. He jumped ship, worked in a fintech business for about 12 months and then set up Broken Heart Love Affair. Right. He recruited 3 senior ECDs, which was unheard of. So the management team was 1 planning strategist and 3, and everybody was like, what are you doing? Who's going to get the limelight? They're all going to scream at each other. The opposite has happened. They've just won their first Cannes Lion after being around for 18 months.
Yeah. Wow.
Just this year. And they are hoovering network business left, right and center in Canada and in the United States. But what they're being holistic about their attitude, what they will get. And if you think back to what I was saying before about value-based pricing, what they're saying is how we will work, what we know will deliver for clients. They're very client-centric in their new business strategy. Right. They've taken down the ego and amped up the brains.
Yeah.
And the way they talk to the market is just brilliant. And there's a handful of agencies in the US. And, the days of the Droga Fives, personality-based agencies, it's just done. It's about the culture and connection and more about actually how you work as a consultancy business. And the agencies in North America are doing it really, really well, because they're doing thought leader pieces that get into the broadsheets about what's going on. And the other thing is, forget the trade press globally. It's a mess. You need to be we all need to be talking about what we think of other industries. Yeah. Anybody who works in search engine optimization will know that one of the highest drivers of web traffic is where you do something versus something.
Yeah.
Google's hoovers it up. Yeah. It's the same with other industries. Our industry versus architecture. Yeah. Not a lot of that being talked about. I mean, Sid Lee, one of the great agencies in Canada, owns an architecture practice. They are just talking about the world differently. It's creativity, creative power in its holistic sense, and a conglomerate of brains who put it together. So the ego-based single person ECD, those days are done.
Okay.
Clients want to know how cool you are and what your people do.
So that's interesting. I mean, when you were here and we were working in the UK, we were always known as, or we always thought of the UK markets being very creative, very dynamic. Is that still the view? What's your view of the UK? This is a question that's come from one of the panels from Jeremy, actually. So,
going to be careful how I say this, but actually, no, I'm not. To hell with it. Having come to Canada, work with the Canadian agencies, and what they do is they wait to be told because the big sister south of the border. Now, I was never used to that. Britain reports into nobody, right? You are normally the center of gravity for Europe, Middle East, Africa, right? Canada, very different. What that made me then look back on my 15 years of running the MAA, looking at the UK agency sector, is what the hell were we sitting on our hands for? You are a world-class sector with world-class brains charging a fiver for some of the best stuff you do. What are you waiting for? The opportunities you get in the UK are better than the opportunities they get in Canada. And if this is the one thing that the Canadian agencies do, it's sublime. When they get given the opportunity by a global brand, they knock it out the fucking park.
Yeah.
In the UK, I saw agencies with a tendency of laziness. And I say that critically, it's on a looking back at you.
Yeah.
Because you're worth more than you're charging. You are not playing the global game hard enough. And other countries are going to be coming after your slice of the pie.
Okay.
So my thought to you guys is this: if you think you've got it hard in the UK, try running an agency in Australia, or try running an agency in Canada.
Yeah,
right. You've got no excuse for not being the best you can be.
Sure.
You have a market that expects it, and if you don't ride the living bejeebers out of it, you've got nobody to blame but yourself.
Okay.
I look at some of the frustrating conversations I used to have with certain agency leaders and go, oh my God, we were not talking about the right thing. Yeah. And it makes me think I would have done a better job at the MAA had I done a 12-month secondment or something else, other part of the world, actually. So I'm not just blaming you, I actually blame myself I was too long, for 15 years, focused on the UK and had no idea how bloody easy we have it as an opportunity. The expectation in every other country of what the UK agency sector is capable of is off the scale. Right. And if you're not riding that, you've got nobody to blame but yourselves.
Okay.
And so export, because I'm going to be driving the Canadian agencies to come after your business. And I say that absolutely. We are getting, the way that UK, the IPA managed to get money from the UK government for trade exhibitions and all that sort of thing. Economic Development Canada are about to start rolling some cash into the ICA for the same thing. And I'm going to be telling the world about we're more diverse, we're cleverer. When we're given the chance, we can knock it out the park. We're coming after your business, UK.
Okay, so
if you don't pull your socks up and really ride this one, you have permission to be a British agency. Do it.
Yeah. That's very, very good advice and fighting talk from you again, Scott. Thank you. We're sort of wrapping up. We've got 5 or 6 minutes before we come to the hour. So I'm keen to get as much as I can very quickly out of you. Quick agency leaderships. We've talked about previously in the prep sessions. Any role models that you think we should be keeping an eye on from across the pond? If these people are going to be coming after our business,
I think there are some people. So Tyler Turnbull, who's head of, he was a Canadian guy, ran FCB Canada. He took over the role just before I got to Canada, and he's now head of North America for FCB. He is absolutely one of the dear hearts of IPG, and he's somebody to watch. He knows how to play the game.
He reports into Carter, does he?
He does.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So there's him. There's also, I would say, there's an amazing woman called Ira Baptiste.
Yeah.
Who runs an agency called Brandfire. Black woman. She has that veneer, that almost that gorgeous way of managing clients. I've never seen a better client service leader in the world than this woman. She is so authentically her, and so in face of clients telling you don't want that, don't be so silly, just don't. No, you want this, you want that, and it's going to cost you a bit more. But all of the networks, when she moved to her last agency, were really desperate to get hold of her, and she went into an independent agency called Brandfire and took equity, and she is absolutely knockout.
Right.
And to me, the reason I mention her is because authenticity is difficult to argue with. One of the things that we've done as an industry is we've totally devalued client leadership. We've devalued completely account handling, 100%.
Okay.
We've turned it into a bag carrying pointlessness. And actually, your senior account people should be planning on the hoof. They should be looking for new business. Remember, we used to, at MA board meetings, used to call it the dark arts of account handling. I think it was, oh God, what's the name of the woman who used to be head of ARC, who went to Asia?
Diana Crawley.
Yes, Diana Crawley, who came up with the dark arts of account handling notion. She was bloody right, absolutely bloody right. You need to power up because if you haven't got strong enough client leads, all the work will be sat on your desk, and you should be running the agency.
No, that's great. Any advice for agencies as they approach whatever 2022, 23 looks like?
Ignore it. Actually, in part, ignore it. You can only do. It's like in life, right? You can only do what you can control. You cannot, as agencies, sort the pandemic. It's out of your hands. All you can do is your universe of what you can manage. You need to focus on your people. They are crumbling. Our research, as does the 4As in the US, shows the mental health, the burnout of our people is absolutely off the page. And we were bad enough before we hit the pandemic in the agency world. So you need to be a decent human being. Your emotional intelligence needs to be your main driver to drive your people, who then will make you money. Because if you don't, you'll be doing it on your own and you will crumble. So you can only, it's easier said than done. Don't worry about what's going on in the world. But just do what you can do. And put something on your to-do list which is going to scare the shit out of you. I always tell our member agencies here, you have to have something on your to-do list that will frighten the bejesus out of you. And that might be you're going to replace that client with another one in the sector on a value-based pricing model. Keep it simple.
That's great. Last question from me. Is there anything you'd do differently if you were transported back to the UK tomorrow?
Oh my God, I would skyrocket what we were capable of. I don't know what we were waiting for. Do you know what? Actually, it is partly my fault. I kept concentrating. As somebody whose background was direct and promotional, I sort of let that sit in my head for the 15 years I was running. I kept thinking everything competitive. Now, I kept comparing the MAA to the IPA. I kept comparing our agencies with the big agencies. I kept doing that. I should have just shut my eyes to the competitors and do what actually was probably the last 3 or 4 years were probably my most successful at the MAA, and just, it is forward and talk for everybody. I wish I'd actually not just tried to talk for you guys, because the one thing that I've done differently with the ICA that I did with that I didn't do with the MAA is the job of an association or a trade union, whatever we like to, and it does frighten people here when I compare the ICA to a trade union. You should see the look on their faces, because the US and Canada on trade unions is always a bit of an interesting dilemma. But anyway, our job is to be 10 miles ahead of our industry, knowing that when we look over our shoulder, our industry is taking 3 or 4 steps in the same direction. If we talk only a couple of feet ahead of the sector, everything remains static. So the one thing I would change was being more ambitious for what our sector was capable of.
That's really...
And ignoring what everybody else was saying, and actually letting everybody else dictate what we should be. That was probably my biggest mistake.
And I can think of a few sort of board meetings when that sort of thing.
I think, for people like me, I think the thing that I've had a lot of time to really analyse and unpick who I was and am. when you're gay, you spend your entire youth and teenage or childhood, and actually right up into your 20s, thinking of ways of not to be yourself, to try and protect yourself.
Mm.
And then you spend your adulthood unpacking that and trying to reassemble yourself to be the genuine person you are.
Mm.
I think that with the way that I ran the MAA, whilst I do think there was a lot of successes we had because of the great people involved, some of you here, Clive was one of the people who recruited me in the first place. You know, all of that, the thing that I wish I hadn't done was just believe in myself. I allowed other organizations and people to tell me I wasn't quite. And that triggered how I felt about myself. Now, I'm not saying I could have done anything about it in those 15 years. This is all part of growing, and I'll be 50 next year. 39 next year. So, you know, I think it's really important to remember who you are and what you get out of bed for, and being really honest about it and deciding to fire yourself up to be it. I didn't do that all the time that I was running the MAA, which allowed me to do sort of comparative versions of certain things that other associations and other businesses were doing. I wasn't playing at highest common denominator, and I promised myself in Canada I will not do that again. And I ask all of you to take that bit of time. We're not very good at self-care during the pandemic, but take that bit of time. My version is getting out Madonna's Vogue, right? Put it on the 12-inch dance mix, the striker pose dub, love it. Giving yourself a bit of energy, just remember who you were in 1990 when I turned 18, and then stop and then go, okay, does this feeling that I'm feeling right now in reminiscence feel like the same when I go into my job and I stand up and champion what I'm saying for the industry? And if the answer ever is no, get an adjustment and do it and promise yourself to do it. I just think as we get older, we just need to promise ourselves that we need that energy, that naivety, if you like, from when we were younger, but knowing that we're more centered and understand ourselves better, and great. Don't apologize for anything. That's the other thing.
That is brilliant. Okay, Scott, we're literally we're 1 minute over now, so you know, I'm obviously appreciative of your time, most importantly, and everyone.
Bring it on, Clive.
Yeah. So I'll hand over to Clive now to wrap the session up.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott and Jamie. I think we failed to introduce Jamie Matthews at the beginning. Some of you know him. Jamie is CEO of Initials, a great member of the Alliance and a great agency in itself, and clearly a old mucker of Scott's. So thank you both for what was a fascinating conversation. And Scott, you didn't disappoint. You certainly gave great headline. As you have been accused.
Stop pinching Claire Beale's lines, honey.
I know.
Get your own. Get your own.
You told, but it was amazing. And this thing about changing and how we operate and how we should be valuing ourselves and valuing the client and not the input is very well made. And the reason why we have trade bodies is that we fight on these issues together. We will do much better now doing it together than we do as any single agency can. And I do think that Alliance and independent agencies are well placed to do that. But there's a huge amount to digest. We will be broadcasting this again on our channels, and we'll be editing some of great highlights on that, so you can hear some of the great points made. But thank you very much indeed, Jamie and Scott. And I did just put in the chat the UK AEG, which is the UK's Advertising Export Group, is a powerful group which I would encourage people to join. Stephanie, who's on this session, is a big advocate of that, and we are coming after Scott's business as we are after every other business around the world. So we are fighting beyond these shores because we believe that the creativity in the UK is better and within independence. And on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we will be announcing the shortlist for the inaugural Independent Agency Awards. So if you've submitted, you'll find out whether you're on the shortlist, and that is being broadcast live at 5 o'clock. So enough of the ads. Thank you, Scott. Fantastic. We will certainly want to have you back. Jamie, thank you very much indeed for putting the time that you put into this. It's been really good. And everybody have a fantastic evening. Thank you very much indeed, all of you.